If you're like me, you don't exactly have a ton of time to shop for clothes. Ever order 3 sizes of the same shirt just hoping that one fits? Scroll, shop, add to your cart, and you still end up returning everything. That's why you should try Stitch Fix. My wife introduced me to Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix is great. It sends you a fix box with clothes that actually fit and make sense for your life. Work, weekends, whatever. Stitch Fix saves you time, you look great, and you don't even have to think about it. Stitch Fix is no risk, all style. Try it all on in the comfort of your home. Keep what works, send back the rest. Free shipping and returns always, and no subscription required. Plus, get a free try-on for your first fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com/podcast to get $20 off your first order, and Stitch Fix will waive your styling fee. That's stitchfix.com/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. You need the right person with the right background who can move your business forward. If I wanted candidates who match what I'm looking for, I'd trust Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Give your job the best chance to be seen with Indeed's Sponsored Jobs. They help you stand out and hire quality candidates who can drive the results you need. Sponsored Jobs boosts your posts for quality candidates so you can reach the exact people you want faster. And it makes a big difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs because you reach a bigger pool of quality candidates. Join the 1.6 million companies that sponsor their jobs with Indeed. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results now with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed.
And away we go. Episode 1182 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. It is the day of the Washington Wizards 2025-2026 regular season opener. I said, this is the day of the Washington Wizards 2025-2026 regular season opener.
The damn Washington Wizards!
Thank you. ESPN Stephen A. Smith, our Wizards. They are at the Milwaukee Bucks Wednesday night at 8. This is season number 3 of our Wizards being a rebuilding and tanking team. This is a key season in the tank. The 2026 NBA draft is the final draft in which the Wizards could convey a first-round pick as part of the John Wall, Russell Westbrook trade of December 2020. Yeah, that thing still is not complete. The Wizards on December 2nd, 2020, traded Wall and a protected first-round pick to the Houston Rockets for Westbrook. The reported terms of the protected first-round pick: 2023 lottery protected, 2024 top 12 protected, 2025 top 10 protected, 2026 top 8 protected. The pick still is not conveyed, and if the pick hasn't conveyed by the 2026 NBA draft, then the pick becomes a second-round pick in the 2026 NBA draft and a second-round pick in the 2027 NBA draft. Bottom line, it would behoove our Wizards this season to tank and tank hard in order to not lose that first-round pick in this perceived to be loaded 2026 NBA draft. This is how you should be thinking if you're a Wizards fan like me. In-depth preview of the Wizards 2025-2026 regular season coming up later in the show, as we'll speak with Wizards insider Chase Hughes of Monumental Sports Network. Hello and welcome to this Wednesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. On this episode of the podcast, have not one but two guests for you. Next segment, high-level analysis of the mess that is the Washington Commanders defense, as we'll speak with Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's film room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. All-22 style perspective on what's going wrong for the defense and why, and potential personnel and schematic fixes for the defense. Mark is going to do defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr.'s job for him. Mark is going to fix the defense himself. By the way, the Commanders on Tuesday afternoon announced having placed edge defender Dorrance Armstrong on the reserve/injured list and having signed unrestricted free agent edge defender Jalen Holmes to the 53-man active roster. Armstrong, in the 44-22 loss at the Dallas Cowboys this past Sunday, suffered a season-ending knee injury. Holmes was just released by the Commanders on October 18th. Also on Tuesday afternoon, Commanders head coach Dan Quinn, in an appearance on SiriusXM NFL Radio, said that the plan for receivers Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel Sr. this week, quote, is to have full weeks of practice for them, end quote. Great to hear that. McLaurin has been inactive for each of the team's last 4 games due to a quadriceps injury. Samuel was inactive for the loss at the Cowboys due to a heel injury. And also on the show, I'll discuss the Washington Capitals. They in the NHL's 2025-2026 regular season now are 5-2-0, a 4-1 win over the Seattle Kraken at Capital One Arena on Tuesday night. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Lots of feedback on the Commanders off the loss at the Cowboys. Email from Thomas in New York. Writes Thomas, the defense is horrid. This brotherhood stuff is nonsense. If the team doesn't play with pride and determination, injuries only tell part of the story. Thank you for the email, Thomas. I totally agree on the injuries. Yes, the Commanders this season have gotten hit hard by injuries, but injuries do not entirely excuse the disappointing defense or the disappointing season that the team is having. Email from Kevin. Writes Kevin, hey Al, I hate to say it, but with our top 3 wideouts injured and a mediocre defense at best, this is unfortunately a dead year. Too much competition in the NFC for us to realistically compete. I've been optimistic Jaden could elevate the team, but this is a Bengals-Burrow situation where things are just too bad around the quarterback. Likely, we lose our next 3 after the Cowboys and are all but eliminated from the playoffs at that point. Obviously, got to keep playing, but this Cowboys game is a big wake-up call. The team is not as close as we'd like it to be. The defense needs a major personnel overhaul, and Witt needs to be replaced. Let him coach till the end of the year if DQ doesn't want to make a change in season, but it's obvious that Witt is not the guy. Too often, guys are running free down the field. Too few takeaways for a guy who preaches ball is life. On the offensive side, receivers might be fine if the unit is actually on the field, but Noah Brown's health can't be relied on at this point, and Terry has probably reached his age cliff. Not sure what to do about Deebo since he has played well, but is also at his age cliff. LMC is not a starting caliber receiver at this point. Admittedly, I do like Lane. Got my fingers crossed for him. I won't claim to have the answers, but the roster outside of O-line and quarterback just isn't good enough to compete at a high level. Kinlaw, Armstrong, Luvu, and Amos are the only guys on D I really trust. Mikey has been bad. Lattimore and Wags are cooked, and Payne and Johnny Newton look like Jags. This is a tough scene all around. I get that we've been very injured, but this is an expected result with an older roster. Maybe Wise, Jonathan Jones, and Will Harris make the difference here, but I just don't believe it. HTTR, let's hope we somehow beat the Chiefs. Thank you for the email, Kevin. I do disagree on Daron Payne. He this season has been great. He has been one of the best interior defensive linemen in the NFL. He this season has not been a Jag. Jag as in just a guy, not Jacksonville Jaguar. But I hear Kevin on his overall points, including the NFC being stacked. The NFC through Week 7 of the NFL's 2025 regular season has a team that's 4-1-1 in the Green Bay Packers, has a whopping 6 teams at 5-2, and has a team that's 4-2 in the Chicago Bears. If you just go purely by winning percentage, the Commanders are number 13 out of 16 teams in the NFC at 3-4, the only team in the NFC that has a record of 3-4. There's also this. the murderer's row of opposing quarterbacks the Commanders are facing. Last season, they benefited from facing an underwhelming group of opposing quarterbacks. This season, the team is facing one high-level quarterback after another, and the run continues. So the Commanders' next 3 games at the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football this Monday night, October 27th at 8:15. Home to the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday Night Football on November 2nd at 8:20. And home to the Detroit Lions on Sunday afternoon, November 9th at 4:25. Each of those opponents' QB1s is top 10 among all qualified NFL quarterbacks in ESPN's total QBR for this regular season. The Chiefs' Patrick Mahomes is number 3, 77.7. The Seahawks' Sam Darnold is number 6, 72.5. And the Lions' Jared Goff is number 9, 66.6. You combine that with the Commanders getting smashed by injuries, and yeah, it is hard to be super hopeful right now. Hard to be super cheery right now. So much of defense in today's NFL is the opposing quarterbacks who the defense faces. And the Commanders this season are facing a brutal run of opposing quarterbacks. I mean, the guy who just carved up our team this past Sunday, the Cowboys' Dak Prescott, he now is number 1 among all qualified NFL quarterbacks in total QBR for this regular season, 81.2. Email from Marlon G. Writes Marlon, "Hey Al, how about that game?" I think it's time to admit it. The team just regressed as a whole. The defense is worse. Jaden can't find consistency with receivers because they can't stay healthy. Ertz is dropping balls. We now can't run the ball. Lattimore is still a problem. Sainer still completely regressed. He must have read Twitter on how good he was. The coaching is real bad. Not prepared at all. Joe Witt needs to go. Only shining spot is the special teams. And one thing on Terry McLaurin, you know how he was going around talking to media why he deserved a new contract and how he is healthy and all that crap? But why hasn't he spoken to the media now that he's hurt? Preseason, when he was a holdout or hold in, he was on the sideline. Where is Terry now, and why is he quiet? I'm just wondering if anyone in the media or whatever has seen him, because he's just missing. We have a manhood issue. What say you? Thank you for that, Marlon. We have heard nothing from receiver Terry McLaurin during this time in which he has been inactive for each of the team's last 4 games due to a quadriceps injury. You know, there are plenty of injured players who do speak to reporters while those players are injured or are coming back from injury, especially if the players are not on the reserve/injured list. And McLaurin is not on the reserve/injured list. But yeah, nothing from McLaurin to reporters during this time in which he has been inactive for each of the team's last 4 games due to a quadriceps injury. I'm not sure what to make of that. I don't know that this is anything nefarious, but it has added to the mystery and murkiness of this situation, which, remember, also has included confusion about what exactly this injury is. The injury is listed as being a quadriceps injury, but there a few weeks ago were reports suggesting that McLaurin might actually be dealing with a hip flexor injury or even a sports hernia. This has been a very odd last 4 months for McLaurin, starting with him on July 15th in that 32-plus minute session with reporters. Remember that? Sounding off on his frustration with the team and contract extension talks. We had the training camp holdout. We had the training camp hold in. We had him signing a contract extension that, once the true details emerged, was revealed to be very much a team-friendly extension and not the win that many people, fans and media, initially thought it was for McLaurin. We had McLaurin over the Commanders' first 2 games of this regular season having just 7 receptions for just 75 yards and no touchdowns on 13 targets. We had him getting injured on a 56-yard reception in the 41-24 win over the Las Vegas Raiders at Northwest Stadium on September 21st. And now we have him having, disappeared while recovering from an injury with which there is some mystery. Just a strange, bizarre, disjointed last 4 months for Terry McLaurin. Email from Kim. Writes Kim, "Hi Al, yeah, I'm bummed. I'm not a high-priced coordinator, but even I thought, well, run Bill and try the rookies out. We will be all right if the defense holds. Well, Dallas stuffed Bill, and the defense was bad, and the rookies were unseen for the most part. I don't understand the game plan. McNichols had a nice short screen and run, then nothing. Geez, go with what is working. This is confusing to me. Also, tell me, what constitutes a sack? There are obvious sacks we see, but sometimes there are sacks recorded we don't see. The stats seem to register them, and I don't know how. Also, I think there is going to be a change on defense, kind of like our O-line change. A big change is coming. Mark my words. Thank you for the email, Kim. Well, we next segment with Mark Bullock, we'll examine the potential change that could be coming for the defense. The basic definition of a sack is it is when a defensive player tackles the opposing quarterback at or behind the line of scrimmage on a drop back, or when the opposing quarterback runs out of bounds at or behind the line of scrimmage on a drop back. And drop back is key. The determination must be made that the quarterback was dropping back to pass. A quarterback on an option run or a design run getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage does not constitute a sack. That instead is a negative yardage run. What I think can be confusing is when a quarterback is scrambling and runs out of bounds, that goes down as a sack if he runs out of bounds at or behind the line of scrimmage. So you'll see a play where the quarterback isn't tackled at all and ran out of bounds, but the play goes down as a sack. Hey, if you are a Commanders fan, check out bgobsession.com, an outstanding site for Commanders conversation. The Sons of Washington forum on bgobsession.com is tremendous. BG Obsession, or BGO, has been going strong since 2009. No politics, just friendly and passionate discussion about the Commanders and more. Great contests, game day chats, and camaraderie. Both old school and new school fans are welcome. Visit and join BGO at bgobsession.com. bgobsession.com, home to your burgundy and gold obsession. If you're like me, you don't exactly have a ton of time to shop for clothes. Ever order 3 sizes of the same shirt, just hoping that one fits? Scroll, shop, add to your cart, and you still end up returning everything. That's why you should try Stitch Fix. My wife introduced me to Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix is great. It sends you a fix box with clothes that actually fit and make sense for your life. Work, weekends, whatever. Stitch Fix saves you time, you look great, and you don't even have to think about it. Stitch Fix is no risk, all style. Try it all on in the comfort of your home. Keep what works, send back the rest. Free shipping and returns always, and no subscription required. Plus, get a free try-on for your first fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com/podcast to get $20 off your first order, and Stitch Fix will waive your styling fee. That's stitchfix.com/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. You need the right person with the right background who can move your business forward. If I wanted candidates who match what I'm looking for, I'd trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Give your job the best chance to be seen with Indeed's sponsored jobs. They help you stand out and hire quality candidates who can drive the results you need. Sponsored jobs boost your post for quality candidates so you can reach the exact people you want faster. And it makes a big difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs because you reach a bigger pool of quality candidates. Join the 1.6 million companies that sponsor their jobs with Indeed. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results now with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed.
If you are listening to this podcast via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can rate the podcast with a star rating. 5-star ratings are greatly appreciated. They help us out a lot. Thank you for doing them. The 3-4 Washington Commanders have the following rankings among the NFL's 32 teams in the 2025 regular season through Week 7. Number 18 in total defense in terms of DVOA. Number 24 in total defense in terms of expected points added per play per RBSDM.com. Number 28 in lowest opponent's yards per play, 5.84. number 19 in lowest opponent's third down efficiency, 39.1, tied for number 29 in takeaways, 3. Not good. How likely, how possible is an in-season fix for this defense, which has been so bad over the team's last 2 games? The 25-24 walk-off loss to the Chicago Bears at Northwest Stadium on Monday Night Football on October 13th, and the 44-22 loss at the Dallas Cowboys this past Sunday. I am very pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Commanders analyst Mark Bullock. Mark is exceptional at talking Commanders from an X's and O's standpoint. He does tremendous Commanders All-22 breakdowns. You could read his work on his Substack, Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark has written for The Athletic and for The Washington Post. He also is a Commanders fan. You can follow Mark on X at Mark Bullock NFL. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well, all things considered. Thanks. How about you?
Doing well. Nice to talk to you. Mark on his Substack over the last few days has put up some tremendous pieces on the Commanders defense. Monday, headline, quote, Commanders defense needs personnel changes after loss to Cowboys, end quote. Tuesday, headline, quote, some potential schematic changes to help fix the Commanders defense, end quote. We, over the course of this conversation, are going to get into all of this, but generally speaking, do you view the defense this season as salvageable? Or does this more feel like one of these seasons in which the team just has a really bad defense?
I don't think it's completely unsalvageable. Like I think they have more pieces than they did last year. I feel better about the talent that they have compared to last year. I think the issue is that they've added more pieces to play a certain style, and the pieces that they added are not playing up to the standard that they are capable of. And so, like, we know that Joe Witt and Dan Quinn want to play this aggressive man coverage style of defense, and they went and traded for Marshawn Lattimore. They drafted Trey Amos and Mikey Sanders still. Those guys, you know, they were added because they were good in man coverage or had the potential to become good in man coverage, and they just haven't played up to that level. Like Marshawn Lattimore hasn't been anywhere near the player he once was, and he's been getting picked on. Mikey Sanders still has really struggled since moving back into the slot. And Trey Amos has played pretty well, but you know he's still a rookie. He's had some ups and downs as well. And when you want to play man coverage and be super aggressive with it, you need two of your top 3 corners to be playing well, and 2 of your top 3 corners are not playing well right now. I feel like their talent is better than what it was last year. They might have to go away from that core philosophy of what they want to do, like they had to last year, and they had to pretty early last year when it was pretty clear after the first couple games that the Benjamin St-Juste and Emmanuel Forbes were not going to be able to play the style they wanted to play. They changed and they went to more zone-based stuff, and they put 2 safeties back deep to protect the corners and that kind of thing. And so I think at this point we're now 7 games into the season, and it's pretty clear that the guys are not going to be able to execute the way they want to with the style that they want to. So I think some adjustments are going to have to be made.
When it comes to those potential adjustments in terms of personnel, what would you like to see done?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious one that everyone is kind of pointing to is Marshawn Lattimore being benched. And I don't want to be calling for any player to be benched. I don't like doing that. But I think it's pretty clear that trade at this point has not worked out. And I'm not critical of them for trying that trade. Like, it was worth a shot. They were really struggling at corner last year. Lattimore was once one of the best man corners in the NFL. And there was legit questions or legit optimism that he could get back to playing at a decent level, maybe not the all-pro level that he once was, but at a decent level. And so I thought it was worth the effort worth the shot of taking that trade. But not all trades work out, and this one I think at this point clearly hasn't. Now, whether they make some schematic changes and make it easier for Lattimore, or whether they want to try and stay with their man coverage philosophy, if they want to try to stay with their philosophy, I think they should probably be looking at taking Lattimore out of the lineup right now. it's pretty clear that, whoever he gets matched up on, whether it was Pickens or Lamb in this past game, or Drake London in the Falcons game, or Rome Odunze in the Bears game, or DJ Moore in the Bears game, whoever he was getting matched up on, he was struggling to stay with in man coverage. So, yeah, I think that would be the primary move would be taking Lattimore out. Whether you then move Sanders still back outside and you hope that he improves playing outside where he's not exposed to kind of playing in the slot where receivers can have a two-way go on him. That might help him, and then you might be improving two spots in one go. And then the other one, which is a tougher one for them to justify, is Bobby Wagner. And I know a lot of fans have wanted to see Wagner out because of his coverage issues. They could justify playing Wagner for quite a while because he was such a good run defender. And at the start of the year, he was playing almost at an elite level as a run defender. And you saw that their run defense was really good, and he was a large part of that. But these past two games, he's had probably the worst two games as a run defender in his time in Washington. And I don't want to overreact to two games. It's not like he's now a terrible run defender. It could just be two bad games for him, and he could well bounce back against the Chiefs and play really well against the run. But when the elite run defense starts dropping down, then it's hard to justify leaving him on the field in the coverage situations and leaving him exposed in that regard. And we've seen him kind of struggle in coverage. The blitzing him hasn't worked quite so often, and part of that is schematically. And so you start thinking, could you get Jordan McGee in there? You see whether he's going to be that long-term replacement for Wagner. And it's not necessarily you bench Wagner and you play Jordan McGee and it's just a straight swap. Maybe it's a rotation, and McGee comes in for a few snaps here and there, and Wagner starts dropping down on his snaps rather than playing 100% of the snaps, and you slowly transition it that way, or whether you try and adjust the defense so that McGee and Wagner are on the field at the same time, so that you have a little bit more athletic ability and a coverage guy in McGee that can do some of the coverage assignments, and have the athleticism to go side to side in the run game, and let Wagner be a little bit more static in the middle. That might be another option for them as well. So I think those would be the two main changes, from a personnel standpoint, where you're taking out two very established veterans that have been very good players, both potentially Hall of Famers, and it's tough to move on from those guys. But I think those would be the two that I think at this point would be the most justifiable changes that they can make.
The situation at safety, Quan Martin in the loss at the Cowboys played on just 60% of the Commanders' defensive snaps, so just the third most defensive snaps among Commander safeties in the game. And he, as best as we can tell, did not get hurt in the game. Jeremy Reeves played on 87% of the Commanders' defensive snaps. Darnell Savage, 69%. So we may have seen a benching of sorts of Martin. We're also barely seeing Percy Butler and Tyler Owens play on defense. So they are playing on special teams. What do you think about what's going on at safety? And would you do anything different?
Yeah, I kind of feel a little bit bad for Quan Martin. I think he's been put in a really tough spot. When they entered the year, they clearly had an idea of Quan Martin was going to be the deep safety, and Will Harris is going to be the guy that rotates down and covers tight ends man to man. And when Will Harris got injured, Quan Martin had to sort of be the guy that ends up doing all the tougher assignments. So sometimes he's still playing back deep when they want him to, but then he would also have to rotate down and try to cover tight ends man to man, and he struggled in that regard. We saw that in the Falcons game against Kyle Pitts. He gave up a pass interference and actually gave up the catch as well to Kyle Pitts in a critical spot, and he struggled a little bit, but that wasn't the role that they necessarily had envisioned for him when they went into the year. So he's had to adapt, based on the injury to Will Harris and them not having another safety that they trust in man coverage, against tight ends. So he's been put in tougher spots, but he has been struggling in those tougher spots. I I don't really see it with Jeremy Reeves on defense personally. I think Reeves is capable of providing a really big spark play with a big hit here and there, but he also misses a fair few tackles and his coverage can be very up and down. And we saw that he had a very similar play to the one that Quan Martin had that lost in the Bears game, where he ran out to the flat, missed a tackle, and the Bears got a 55-yard touchdown out of it. Jeremy Reeves in this past game had basically the exact same play against the Cowboys, and he missed a tackle in the flat on, I think it was Turpin, and fortunately other defenders were behind him and managed to save it from being a touchdown, but he still gave up 17 yards. So I don't think Reeves is playing particularly well. Savage has had some bright spots, but nothing that says like, oh, he's their long term answer at safety. So it's tough. I'd personally like to see what Tyler Owens could do, but that's kind of it's the unknown versus the guys that you do know. And if they're not playing him, there's probably a reason. Like, he was an undrafted free agent for a reason. So the fact that they are having issues at safety and they're still not playing him suggests he's probably not ready for a bigger role yet. And you might just say, well, they're playing terribly, they can't get any worse, play him anyway. And sure, you could get to that point, but I think while they are only a game below 500, they're still in contention this season. The season's not over as much as people like to make it out to be. I don't think they're gonna just start benching everyone and playing all the young players. I think they could get to that point if they go on a little losing streak here, but I don't think they're at that point yet.
What now for the Commanders at edge defender of Dorrance Armstrong in the loss at the Cowboys, suffering a season-ending knee injury? The team already had edge defenders Dietrich Wise Jr., Javante Jean-Baptiste, and Drake Jackson on the reserve/injured list, though the Jackson situation is unique. He's recovering from a torn patellar tendon that he suffered in October 2023. The team just signed the guy as an unrestricted free agent on October 15th, but are the top two edge defenders now Jacob Martin and Preston Smith? It would seem that Von Miller should stay as a situational pass rusher. How should the team proceed at edge defender?
I think if they want to stay in a four-man front, that's probably what they do. They did play Johnny Newton at defensive end a little bit at the end of that game against the Cowboys, and Kinlaw lined up there once or twice as well. We saw last year that Ron Payne played on the edge when they were really struggling to defend the run last year, and that kind of bulked them up a little bit. So all three of their kind of top interior tackles can, in theory, play as kind of a heavy end in a 4-3 front, and that's something they might look to explore. I kind of think that the way they might go is kind of shifting more to what you call a three-man front or a five-man front, which would be essentially a 3-4 base where you play all three of your interior defensive tackles. So you have either Kinlaw or Payne at nose tackle, and then Newton and the other one of Kinlaw and Payne as your three techniques, and then you have two edge defenders outside of them, and one of them would be probably Jacob Martin. In pass rushing situations, it would be Von Miller, and then I think the way they went in this game was they put Frankie Louvu down on the edge as the other edge defender, and then they had Jordan McGee on the field next to Bobby Wagner as the second linebacker, and that had some success. That there is limits to it, as it's basically a 3-4 front, and you're not going to run a 3-4 against 11 personnel particularly often. So there is still some adjustments to make there, but I think that will be potentially the way they try to go, where Louvu almost becomes more of an edge defender, and McGee steps in at linebacker.
What do you make of the season that Frankie Louvu is having?
Yeah, it's a tough one. He started the season off not great, and I think they had these high expectations for him, where he was going to rush the passer a little bit more, play a little bit more on the edge, but still playing linebacker. And I think they almost overloaded him a little bit, and it kind of didn't work either way. He wasn't excelling as a defensive end. He he wasn't excelling as a linebacker, and so they kind of had to peel it back a little bit. And the other part of it is that opposing offenses understood how the Commanders want to use him, where it's him going forward and attacking and rushing and blitzing, and so they started treating him as a defensive end rather than treating him as a linebacker that the running back could block. They would account for him with an offensive lineman, and Luvu's a really good blitzer, and he has some pass rush juice, but he's not a traditional pass rusher that you line up over the left tackle 40 times a game and you let him go to work, right? So it's a different ball game trying to rush against an offensive lineman than it is against a running back that you can just run over with sheer force. So he that's kind of played into it. He really struggled as a run defender and tackling in space the first couple of weeks. I would say that he did show some improvement, sort of the fourth and fifth game. He started to play the run a lot better, and be a little bit more sound as a tackler. But he hasn't played with the same play style that he was known for. If you remember last year, it was a guy that everyone said he played with his hair on fire and he was 100 miles an hour, and he wouldn't necessarily always be attacking the right spot, but he'd be going there at 100 miles an hour and he'd be disruptive as a result. And we haven't seen that from him this year, really. We've seen a more calculated player, and that's made him get into the right spot a little bit more often, but he's getting there slower. He's not playing it as aggressively, and he's not being as disruptive as a result. And that has that's really impacted how his impact on the game. He's just not having the same impact because he's not playing with that same play style.
Much more with Mark Bullock in moments. The Nace Law Group, accident and injury lawyers. It will fight for you and win for you. Just recently, an $8 million jury verdict in Baltimore City Circuit Court in a case in which the Nace Law Group represented the family of a 42-year-old man who died after a simple procedure. Lead attorney Chris Nace is a big Commanders fan and a big supporter of this podcast, and his firm wins trials. If you have a case, contact the Nace Law Group. Call 202-902-7611 or visit Washington, D.C., injurylawyers.com and tell the Nace Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. The Nace Law Group is tremendous. It is a Washington, D.C.-based family law firm that handles medical malpractice, personal injury, birth injury, legal malpractice, and consumer protection cases, offering aggressive advocacy for victims in Washington, D.C. and West Virginia. The Nace Law Group fights for victims of all kinds of situations, including victims of errors made during diagnosis, during surgery, or with medication, victims of injuries caused by dangerous medications or medical devices, as well as defective auto parts, victims of accidents involving cars, trucks, bikes, or motorcycles, victims of deceptive trade practices and false advertising, heck, victims of shady lawyers. If your attorney acts in bad faith, is unethical in his or her counsel, or is negligent in his or her work, you could have a claim for legal malpractice. The Nace Law Group has represented corporate clients throughout the region. If you feel that you've been wronged, if you think that you've been wronged but aren't sure, contact the Nace Law Group and schedule a no-obligation appointment. Call 202-902-7611 or visit Washington, D.C., injurylawyers.com and tell the Nace Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. That's 202-902-7611 or Washington, D.C., injurylawyers.com and tell the Nace Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. The Nace Law Group, accident and injury lawyers. We're talking with Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. So as mentioned, you on your Substack on Tuesday put up a post on potential schematic changes for Commanders defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. with this defense. I know that you believe that the team's defensive problems are more on the players than on the coaching, but this is Witt's and also head coach Dan Quinn's defense. Like, they got to figure this out. What schematic alterations should Quinn and Witt be considering?
Yeah, so if they don't want to change the personnel, or if they feel like changing the personnel is not going to do anything because they feel like they're playing the best players, and they might well be feeling like, Marshall Lattimore is just a better corner than Jonathan Jones comes in or Noah Igbinoghene comes in, they probably should feel like Marshawn Lattimore is a better corner than those guys. So if they don't want to change the personnel and they can't just keep sticking with what they've been doing for the past 7 games because clearly it's not working. So I think the alternative option, if you're not going to change the personnel, or even if you do change some of the personnel, is to change the scheme. And that's not an ideal thing to do midway through a season. Obviously, you have your philosophy, and we talked about it. They want to be a man coverage team. They want to be able to be aggressive on the outside so that they can blitz more and force quick pressure and try to create turnovers by pressuring the quarterback. But that just hasn't come to be so far this year. And so the alternative option is to switch it up and play some more zone. Now they do play a fair bit of zone, but the zones that they're playing, it's quite heavily leaning more towards Tampa 2, and they try to disguise their Tampa 2 by using different versions of it, where they invert a corner that plays deep instead of a safety, and then they have a deep safety playing the hole. Sometimes it's a linebacker dropping back, sometimes it's a safety playing the hole, and they switch up who's getting to the different spots to try to disguise it. But at the end of the day, it's still Tampa 2, and that has been their kind of go-to zone coverage look this year. And so when quarterbacks are kind of dropping back in the pocket, if they see that it's not man coverage and it's zone coverage, that they're pretty sure it's going to be Tampa 2, and they know where the weak spots in the Tampa 2 are. And we saw that in this game against the Cowboys, that 74-yard touchdown to CeeDee Lamb. The Commanders were playing an inverted Tampa 2, where Marshawn Lattimore was the outside corner, and he dropped back to playing a deep half safety role. Quan Martin played the other safety role, and Darnell Savage started as a deep safety, but he worked inside to play the middle hole. And Lamb just ran straight up the middle of the field, and Darnell Savage should have carried him. That is the role of that whole player, is to carry that seam route down the middle of the field. He didn't, and so Lamb was running right down the middle of the field in between Martin and Lattimore. And then obviously what happened where he caught the ball, and Lattimore and Martin tried to collide in on him, and they both hit each other rather than Lamb, and Lamb went and turned it into a touchdown. But it wasn't fully their fault. Darnell Savage should have been there taking away that route as well. But the point is that teams are knowing that if they're playing zone coverage, it's probably some form of Tampa 2, and they're just changing who gets to where, but it is still Tampa 2, and they know how to beat that. And so I would like to see them shift up their zone coverages. And to be fair to Joe Witt, he did that at times in this Cowboys game, and he had some success doing that when they were trying to fight back into the game, and they did get a couple of stops defensively. And it's hard looking back now to remember that they did actually get a couple of stops defensively. But they did. And when they did that, they were switching up the zone coverages, and sometimes they played cover 3. Sometimes they played a variation of cover 3 where they start with 2 safeties deep and one rotates down and one rotates deep. And that's known as cover 3 buzz. And then they played a couple of random snaps of quarters coverage. And when they were shifting through those different types of zone coverages, you saw Dak Prescott sit in the pocket and be like, oh, I wasn't expecting him to play cover 3. I was expecting Tampa 2, or I was expecting man coverage. And then he held onto the ball and they got a sack. And then that first play of the 2-minute drill right before the half, where obviously there was a couple big plays and the Cowboys scored and extended the lead just before the half. But the first play was a sack, if you remember that one. And they actually played a surprise quarters coverage, and Dak Prescott dropped back in the pocket and was completely shocked to see that they were in quarters coverage, because the Commanders very rarely play quarters coverage. And it was just straight quarters. It wasn't like a matching quarters that was like a really complex version of quarters. It was just straight quarters coverage, and it picked up the different routes very well. And Dak Prescott had to hold onto the ball, and then Jacob Martin and Von Miller were able to get some pressure and get a sack. So by switching up the different kinds of zones that they use, I think that would be an option for them. They can still play basic zone coverages. Like, it's not like they were playing, as I said, they weren't playing like match quarters. They weren't playing match cover 3. It was still basic cover 3 and quarters variations. But just by shuffling through the different types of zone coverages, it gave the quarterback different looks. and that forced them to hold onto the ball, and that allowed the four-man rush to get some pressure. So I think that would be a way they could go that could alleviate some of the pressure on the corners to play so much man coverage, give them a little bit more protection, and try to confuse the quarterback a little bit by shifting different coverages in there.
The Commanders' paltry takeaway total, 3 in 7 games. Is that just bad turnover luck, as we know that so much of getting takeaways is luck, or is this defense missing the mark in some major way in having so few takeaways?
Yeah, it's some of it is luck. I always find that defenses that rely on turnovers, and look, every defensive coordinator in the league will say, "Oh yeah, we want to generate turnovers because that's the most efficient form of defense. If you can turn the ball over, they can't score, and your offense gets another possession, and that is huge in the NFL." And we know this; everyone knows this by now, that the turnover differential generally, if you win that, you win the game. But it's hard to consistently rely on turnovers. What you can consistently rely on is sound coverages, sound run defense, getting off the field on third down, being a fundamentally sound defense that plays decent coverage, plays decent run defense, uses tackles really well, doesn't give up extra yards after the catch, and forces opposing offenses to consistently put long drives together where they don't. If they get any sort of backed up penalty, then they're going to end up punting or anything like that. So that is how you generate the pressure. And when you force teams to put those long drives where they're only picking up 3 or 4 or 5 yards a play, rather than getting the explosive plays that Washington has been giving up, that's when you put the pressure on opposing offenses, and that's when they start trying to force something or put the ball into a tight window and or get a pass tipped up in the air, and that's when the turnover opportunities can happen. So I think that would be the thing that I'd be focusing on, is trying to be fundamentally more sound. And that's obviously a lot easier said than done. But that would be the way I'd be focusing on it, rather than being like, we've got to create more turnovers. I think that comes from being more sound and putting more pressure on the opposing offense to execute consistently, rather than, as things stand right now, it feels like every time Washington goes on the field, they could give up an explosive play. And when the offense feels like they could get an explosive play, they're not going to be taking too many chances and too many risks and giving many turnover opportunities. So I think that is probably the route to them being a little bit more successful in that regard.
I agree. The conversation on the lack of takeaways is tricky because, yes, takeaways matter a ton, but what's also true is that takeaways so often are random and fluky and come in bunches and then disappear. What's odd, though, is this. Both Dan Quinn and Joe Witt, prior to coming to the Commanders, had track records of having presided over defenses that consistently generated takeaways. I mean, just look at Quinn's and Witt's time together with the Cowboys. So Quinn was the Cowboys defensive coordinator January 2021 to February 2024. Witt was the Cowboys secondary coach and defensive passing game coordinator January 2021 to February 2024. The Cowboys over the 2021 through 2023 regular seasons had an NFL best 59 interceptions. The hope when the Commanders hired Quinn and Witt was that the team had hired 2 guys who would crack the code on generating takeaways. The code apparently has not been cracked.
Well, I mean, and that is part of the reason, like, the defense that they'd put together in Dallas was, they had those corners in Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs that had really good ball skills, and they could play often with vision, and they would drive on absolutely anything underneath, and you could see both of them got beat on like double moves every now and again because they were being so aggressive on driving everything underneath. But the reason they could do that was they had Michael Parsons, which helps wreck any sort of protection plan, but B, they would consistently rush 5 or 6, and the quarterbacks were under pressure constantly because of that, and they were having to force throws out quickly, and that was when you'd see Bland or Diggs drive on those underneath routes and contest catches and show off their ball skills to intercept passes. And Washington just hasn't had the consistency with their pass rush and the consistency with their coverage to make that work. They don't have, obviously they don't have Michael Parsons, but to generate the kind of pressure that they did in Dallas, they need to blitz 5 or 6. And when they blitz 5 or 6, they need their corners to be able to hold up in man coverage and not give up like a quick slant. They need to be able to contest those and potentially take the ball away on those. And as we've seen, Lattimore and Samra still have struggled in those situations. So when they can't get the man coverage on the outside, then they have to stop blitzing quite so aggressively. And when they stop blitzing quite so aggressively, the quarterbacks have more time and they're not forcing those quick throws. So that is where the philosophy comes in. That's why they want to do what they did in Dallas, because it can generate a ton of turnovers, as you said. But they've just not been able to replicate it because they've not had the corners to do it yet.
Outstanding insight. Commanders analyst Mark Bullock of Bullock's Film Room, which you can find at markbullock.substack.com. Mark, thanks, and we'll talk soon.
Of course, talk soon.
All right. Nova Fireplace and Stove. It is Northern Virginia's go-to expert for fireplaces. Transform the look and feel of your home and increase its value by visiting Nova Fireplace and Stove in Woodbridge, Virginia, or by visiting novafireplaceandstove.com. And make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you for $25 off any service. Come in and see Nova Fireplace and Stove's stunning displays, including custom fireplace glass doors and stone refacing options that can completely transform the look of your fireplace. From sleek and modern to rustic and cozy, Nova Fireplace and Stove has something for every style. And here's what else Nova Fireplace and Stove offers: gas fireplace service and repair, chimney cleaning and brickwork repair, generator installation, panel replacements, and water heater repairs, smoke detectors, security lights, and more. Nova Fireplace and Stove is a family-owned, fully licensed and insured company with over-the-top credentials, gas and electrical master's licenses, a Class A contractor's license, and a long list of 5-star reviews to back all of this up. Every job includes a free in-home estimate, and for listeners of the Al Galdi podcast, Nova Fireplace and Stove is offering $25 off any service. Just mention this ad. Nova Fireplace and Stove only works in Northern Virginia and thus knows the homes, the codes, and the people. Your satisfaction is 100% guaranteed. That's Nova Fireplace and Stove in Woodbridge, Virginia, or novafireplaceandstove.com. And make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you for $25 off any service. Nova Fireplace and Stove, where comfort meets craftsmanship, and your fireplace becomes the heart of your home. The Washington Wizards 2025-2026 regular season opener is on Wednesday night. Wizards at the Milwaukee Bucks Wednesday night at 8. This is season number 3 for the Wizards under their current basketball operations regime. May 2023 was when Wizards owner Ted Leonsis announced that Michael Winger had been named president of Monumental Basketball. June 2023 was when Winger announced the hirings of Will Dawkins as general manager and Travis Schlenk as senior vice president of player personnel, and announced the promotion of John Thompson III to senior vice president of Monumental Basketball. The Wizards under this regime are engaged in an all-out, unapologetic rebuild and tank. I often refer to our team as the rebuilding and tanking Wizards. That is what the Wizards are doing, rebuilding and tanking, and I applaud the Wizards for doing these things. These things are what the Wizards need to be doing, but I also acknowledge that there is no guarantee that what the Wizards are doing is going to work. Where are we with what the Wizards are doing? I'm very pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Wizards insider Chase Hughes of Monumental Sports Network. You can follow Chase on X at Chase DC Sports. Hey, Chase, how are you?
Doing great. Good to be back on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Before we get to the team, we now have major upgrades at the team's arena, Capital One Arena. The upgrades are part of the deal that was announced by Ted Leonsis and Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser in March 2024, a deal by which Wizards and Capitals games are remaining at Capital One Arena until at least 2050. D.C., under the terms of this deal, was to spend $515 million on Capital One Arena over 3 years. You have seen the upgrades. upgrades. What can you tell us about the upgrades?
Well, it's very much still a work in progress. This was the first summer of 3, and they are working the Clark construction 24 hours a day. There's 3 8-hour shifts, and they're at this point doing work while events are going on. So I've been in there once. I mean, I pass through all the time, but I sort of walked the hallways and saw the facilities once. It was for the Wizards' lone home preseason game. And what I saw was really nice. I mean, it's much more spacious than it was before. There's more designated space for the players in particular. You know, now they have their own elevators to get down to the garage when previously they might be, sharing it with media or staffers or fans. They're going to have a huge brand new locker room that wasn't ready for the preseason game, but is expected to be ready for the home opener. Interview space, media space, everything is much bigger, much more spacious. And one thing that really caught my eye while I was there is they have new chairs for the players on the bench. They're these cushy, luxury seating chairs almost. And they raise, they lower, they are heated. And they're only on the home bench, which is kind of funny, but there's a real practical use for them here. I've talked to NBA players in the past about how, the height of the bench can kind of affect how loose you stay while you're on the bench before you go into the game. And it's really simple logic. If you think about it, NBA teams can have players who are 6'2" or 7'2". There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all chair. So I think the players are pretty excited about that upgrade right there.
How uncomfortable is the seating for Wizards opponents at Capital One Arena? Are there spikes in the seats? I mean, what are we talking about?
It's just like a normal foldable chair, which I think is kind of the standard around the league, and they're the same height. And I think the height is really the issue. I've talked to players, particularly in Cleveland. When you go to Cleveland, the seats kind of sit a little low because the floor is a little raised, so your knees are kind of higher than they would normally be. And apparently that is just really tough. Guys have to put a cushion down, kind of a booster seat. These really tall players need a booster seat just to make sure that their legs don't cramp up.
So Will Dawkins handles most of the front office press conferences for the Wizards. And one of the things that I appreciate about him is that he is honest about what the team is doing. He is not sugarcoating what the team is doing. What do you think that Michael Winger and Will Dawkins are thinking about where the Wizards truly are in their rebuild right now?
The way they describe it is laying the foundation. The first phase of their rebuild was deconstruction. The second one is laying the foundation, and then building up is what they hope to get towards. And I think the foundation has been mostly laid. I mean, they want to build through the draft. They've had 3 drafts. They've made a ton of draft picks, 3 first-round picks a year ago, 2 this summer. Of course, Bilal Coulibaly was the first one that they made. And, if you look back at NBA rebuilds that have worked, 3 drafts are quite a few. And a lot of teams that, where the rebuilds were successful, it didn't happen overnight, but they started collecting pieces early. So I think it's just pretty much stating a fact that if this thing does work, they've probably already made the majority of their draft picks, right? They probably expect to be picking pretty high maybe next summer. We'll see about the summer after that. But I think most of the core, if they are going to draft that core, is here. So I think this year is sort of taking a step forward in terms of what we're going to expect from the young players who have been here for a year or 2 in terms of their development. Guys like Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George. You could throw Cam Whitmore in that mix, A.J. Johnson. They weren't drafted by the team, but they were part of those draft classes. It would be great to see some individual progress. They don't need everyone to develop on the same timeline, but maybe a few guys take considerable steps forward, and then maybe the defense takes a big step forward, or maybe it's the offense. I think you're trying to set the stage for being a much more competitive team the following season. Maybe you compete for the postseason the following year, or at least get pretty close to doing that. So I think this is a year where you're hoping to see some tangible progress, in particular from some of the individuals that they've drafted in the first round.
The Wizards this past July 6th, hours after the end of the NBA's moratorium period in the 2025 offseason, announced having acquired C.J. McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, Cam Whitmore, and a second-round pick in the 2027 NBA draft as part of a three-team trade with the New Orleans Pelicans and Houston Rockets. And the Wizards in this trade dealt Jordan Poole to the Pelicans. But the major takeaway from this trade is that it reportedly sets up the Wizards to have around $100 million in salary cap space in the 2026 offseason. Do you think that the thinking from Michael Winger and Will Dawkins is to use that cap space in the 2026 offseason to make major player acquisitions to bust out of this rebuild? Or do you think that the thinking from Winger and Dawkins is to use that cap space to take on more bad contracts in order to bolster the team's inventory of draft picks?
I think it's probably more likely the latter, but it's going to give them some optionality, not only to go out in free agency, and that would be the sort of the general timing that a lot of rebuilds sort of go and try to plug some holes in free agency. We saw Detroit do that. We saw Houston do that to varying degrees of success. You draft a bunch of young players and you're not going to build a complete team that way. So you plug in the holes with veterans who can speed up the timeline. But there is a very new dynamic in the NBA with the CBA and the second apron and how punitive the punishments are if you bump up against that. So there could be a situation where teams get too expensive around the league and you could bring in players and they're maybe really good players and not necessarily the traditional bad contracts where you just have to take on salary a guy's over the hill and you're just doing it just to get the draft pick. They could actually, I think there's a scenario where they bring in guys who can ultimately or instantly be part of their core. And, maybe even fit the timeline in terms of age, because there's teams out there that are going to become sort of overflowed with young talent that they can't keep everybody. But then there is, I think, probably the most likely scenario, as you mentioned, you take on some bad contracts, you get draft picks. They did that with Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart came over at the trade deadline. They got a first round pick. It was kind of scary toward the end, whether they would keep it or not, but the Memphis Grizzlies ended up, advancing into the play-in tournament. And the Wizards kept the pick, and they got Will Riley, who's been very impressive through the preseason.
We're previewing the Wizards' 2025-2026 regular season with Wizards insider Chase Hughes of Monumental Sports Network. Let's get into some of these building block players for the Wizards. Bilal Coulibaly, he on September 12th underwent a surgical procedure to repair a ligament tear in his right thumb. The injury was sustained during FIBA Eurobasket play with the French national team. The Wizards, in announcing this procedure, did not give a timetable for his return. How's he doing, and what do we know about when he might play this season?
I think he's coming along well. Will Dawkins said during his preseason press conference he thought he'd miss a few weeks of the season. I don't think that's changed, but he's practicing with the team now. I'm seeing him shoot after practice. He looks good. I mean, I'm sure his shot's a little rusty. I think it's going to get better over time. This was a shooting hand injury, right, to his right thumb. So he's going to have to find his rhythm again. But he was able to work with his left hand. He was able to work on his conditioning. His best skills at this point in his career are on the defensive end, so I don't think the injury is going to affect that much. Certainly he's hopefully not going to re-aggravate that injury by, trying to go for a deflection or a steal. But I think he's right on course to return early this season, maybe the second week of the season. And I would probably set the expectations a little bit low for his offense because it was his shooting hand. But I think obviously he'll make a significant impact defensively right away, because if you look at the metrics last year, he was legitimately one of the more effective wing defenders in the league.
Who do you as the most likely leading scorer for the Wizards in the 2025-2026 regular season?
I'm going to go with Bub Carrington if we're talking about total points, because C.J. McCollum is the most talented scorer on this roster. He's averaged 20-plus points per game for 10 straight years. But who knows what's on the other end of the trade deadline, right? With any veteran at this point in their rebuild. Bub Carrington, meanwhile, played all 82 games last year. He's a talented offensive player. I think he's going to take a step forward on that side of the court. So if you're asking me points per game, I go C.J. McCollum. If it's total points by the end of the year, I'll go Bub Carrington.
The Wizards this past June 25th took Trey Johnson out of the University of Texas with the number 6 overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. He played college basketball for just one season, but he for Texas in his 2024-2025 freshman season was a really good scorer. Johnson for that season was number 1 among all qualified players in the SEC in points per game at 19.9, was number 4 among all qualified players in the SEC in three-point percentage at 39.7. and was number 1 among all qualified players in the SEC in minutes per game at 34.7. ESPN NBA draft analyst Jay Billis, he during the ESPN telecast of the first round of the 2025 NBA draft called Johnson the best overall shooter in the draft. What are your expectations for Johnson this season?
I'm sure there'll be some ups and downs, but I think he's going to hit the ground running as a three-point shooter to a degree that we haven't seen a player do for the Wizards in quite a while, because he's the best shooting prospect they've drafted in many years. I mean, certainly since Corey Kispert, but Corey Kispert was a 4-year college player, right? His three-point shooting numbers were amazing, but Trey Johnson's younger. I think he's done more off the dribble already at this stage. He shot about 40% from 3 last year, about 40% from NBA range. He's also a really good shooter in transition, so I think he already has adjusted to the distance of the NBA three-point line, and the fact that he can shoot on the run, and we saw that in the preseason, and he can play fast. I think that fits in really well with how the Wizards like to play. They were 4th in pace last year. So I think he's going to average double-digit points per game. I think he's going to get a lot of minutes, probably 20 to 25 minutes to start. By the end of the season, it's probably 30 to 35 minutes. He'll get plenty of shots. I just think the one thing to watch will be, who can set him up. Like most young players, rookies, they need someone else usually to generate some open looks for them. And the Wizards, I don't think it's going to be a strength to get into the paint and find open three-point shooters. And, he's got to continue to develop off the dribble. So that's one thing to watch, but I think the shooting is legitimate and we'll see it right away.
The man who the Wizards took with the number 2 overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft, Alex Sarr. In what areas of his game does the team most want to see improvement this season?
Scoring around the rim. Last year he took a very large percentage of his shots from the three-point line, which is, something he's comfortable with, but, he's a 7-footer who can jump out of the gym. He's got to play to those strengths, and I think the team has recognized it. Alex Sarr's talked about it. He wants to roll more to the basket, take advantage of his passing in those scenarios out of the short roll, but also be able to throw down more lobs and just get more high percentage shots around the basket. And he's gotten stronger. I think he's gotten more confident. He's playing a little bit more aggressive than he did last year. So I think if he can balance out the three-point shooting, which hopefully will improve, with more shots around the basket, he can become a more complete offensive player. And then certainly they want to see him continue to make strides on defense because they feel like he can be one of the best defensive players in the league someday.
Best guess as to what the Wizards starting lineup on Wednesday night will be?
I think it's the same lineup we saw in the first and third preseason games, which is Bub Carrington, C.J. McCollum, Keyshawn George, Chris Middleton, and Alex Sarr. I think whether it was going to be Bilal Coulibaly or Keyshawn George was the question mark coming in, but once we realized how long Bilal Coulibaly would be out and that he'd missed opening night, I feel very comfortable about putting Keyshawn in there. And again, that was the lineup they used for the 2 preseason games where they had a full stable of players.
All right, I'm not saying that either of the following scenarios is likely, but if I said to you that the Wizards finish the 2025-2026 regular season in the upper half of the NBA in either team offensive rating or team defensive rating, which one is it?
Upper half is going to be really tough because they were 30th in offense last year, 27th in defense, but man, I'll go offense. I think their personnel right now is a little bit better suited for the offensive end, and that was really illustrated with the moves they made this offseason. C.J. McCollum came over. He's a really talented scorer. Trey Johnson, Cam Whitmore. I think Will Riley is going to make an impact on the offensive end, and then they've got their young guys who are going to take a step forward. I think they have some really good defensive pieces, and the long-term outlook might be better on defense, but I think they're going to have some trouble stopping the ball at the point of attack on the perimeter. They got a lot of young guards, a lot of offense forward guards, if you include C.J. McCollum in there. They don't really have anyone who is really well suited to stop dribble penetration like they had with Marcus Smart last year. So I think when they ultimately get that someday. And maybe Bilal Coulibaly ends up being that guy when he comes back from injury. But I think once they get that someday, then their defensive pieces will fall into place. So right now, I'll say their offense is ahead of their defense.
The Wizards head coach, Brian Keefe, Chief Keefe, as we like to call him on this podcast. He served as the team's interim head coach after the team on January 25th, 2024, announced Wes Unseld Jr. as having been removed as Wizards head coach, and the Wizards on May 29th, 2024, officially named Keefe as the 26th head coach in franchise history. So he's entering his second season as the Wizards' official head coach. What stands out to you about Keefe?
Well, a couple things about him fans might not know. He grew up in Boston, in the Boston area, a huge fan of the Boston Celtics, and that was really formative in him becoming not only a basketball player but a basketball coach. He idolized like Larry Bird and guys like that, and went on to play high-level college basketball at UNLV. Sean Marion was his teammate, and since he's really just kind of paid his dues as an NBA assistant, a guy who has overseen the development of a lot of really good young players over the years. And why the Wizards like him in this role is in large part because of that, right? He's worked with guys like Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, guys like that when he was in LA. He's got a long track record as a player development coach, and that's what the Wizards are trying to do right now is develop young players. And one thing that really stands out, any player you ask about him, they'll say this, is that he's very blunt and honest, and he doesn't beat around the bush. He'll walk in the room and just tell you exactly what he's thinking, and it might be in front of other people. But it's kind of the accountability that the Wizards are trying to have with their young players right now. So I think they feel like his background and that sort of leadership style makes him a perfect fit for what they're trying to do. But of course, we'll see how that develops this year, because I think this year is going to be a little bit more important than the last two were in terms of the results of the player development for their team.
And so that leads me to this. How do you think that Michael Winger and Will Dawkins would define a successful 2025-2026 season for the Wizards?
I think it's all about individual player progress. One thing that's got to be noted about where they place in the standings is that they do have their first-round pick that is protected. It's the final year of the protections on the first-round pick they attached to John Wall to send to the Houston Rockets to get Russell Westbrook. The pick is moved around. Now it's owned by the New York Knicks, and this is the last year that it could convey into a first-round pick. So if the Wizards, finished outside of the top 8 in the draft lottery, they would lose their first-round pick, and that would be pretty detrimental at this point in their rebuild. So, I'm not saying that they're like definitely going to finish bottom 8, but that's got to be kept in mind, especially as you watch the team down the stretch of the season. They don't want to lose that draft pick, right? Ideally, I think an ideal season would include guys like Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, some number of them taking fairly significant leaps forward. They don't have to be all-stars overnight, but starting to look like future all-stars. And then if you can keep that pick, that would be a very nice bonus.
Very good. Wizards insider Chase Hughes of Monumental Sports Network. Chase, thanks. All the best.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Al.
All right. Well, it would be awesome to celebrate a successful Wizards rebuild with Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks food is so good and appeals to people of all ages. My entire family loves Omaha Steaks. From handcrafted steaks to delicious fall favorites, Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience. Enjoy USDA-certified tender steaks, juicy burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, plus tailgating favorites like chicken wings, smash burgers, and big deli-style franks. So the food is outstanding. I can't tell you how much my 8-year-old son loves the franks. And right now, during Omaha Steaks' semi-annual sale, you get 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, you get an extra $35 off with the promo code ALGALDI at checkout. Omaha Steaks offers unrivaled quality and variety, and every bite is backed by a 100% guarantee. Omaha Steaks is a family-owned company that has been America's original butcher since 1917. Yes, over 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. Bring home the legendary flavor and everyday convenience of Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during Omaha Steaks' semi-annual sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code ALGALDI at checkout. Using that promo code helps out this podcast a lot. The promo code is simply my name, Al Galdi. That's 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com and an extra $35 off with the promo code ALGALDI at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. If you're like me, you don't exactly have a ton of time to shop for clothes. Ever order 3 sizes of the same shirt just hoping that one fits? Scroll, shop, add to your cart, and you still end up returning everything. That's why you should try Stitch Fix. My wife introduced me to Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix is great. It sends you a fix box with clothes that actually fit and make sense for your life. Work, weekends, whatever. Stitch Fix saves you time, you look great, and you don't even have to think about it. Stitch Fix is no risk, all style. Try it all on in the comfort of your home. Keep what works, send back the rest. Free shipping and returns always, and no subscription required. Plus, get a free try-on for your first fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com/podcast to get $20 off your first order, and Stitch Fix will waive your styling fee. That's stitchfix.com/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. You need the right person with the right background who can move your business forward. If I wanted candidates who match what I'm looking for, I'd trust Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Give your job the best chance to be seen with Indeed's Sponsored Jobs. They help you stand out and hire quality candidates who can drive the results you need. Sponsored Jobs boosts your post for quality candidates so you can reach the exact people you want faster. And it makes a big difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs because you reach a bigger pool of quality candidates. Join the 1.6 million companies that sponsor their jobs with Indeed. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results now with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed.
Well, the Washington Capitals on Tuesday night concluded a 4-game homestand, and they concluded that 4-game homestand with a really nice win, a 4-1 win over the Seattle Kraken, whose head coach is former Caps assistant coach Lane Lambert. Lane Lambert was the Caps assistant coach from 2014 to 2018, but the Caps on this homestand went 3-1-0, and the Caps in the NHL's young 2025-2026 regular season now are 5-2-0. The Caps once again dominated the puck possession battle. The Caps had 34 shots on goal to the Kraken's 19, and per natural stat trick had 64 5-on-5 shot attempts to the Kraken's 43, including 14 5-on-5 high danger shot attempts to the Kraken's 2. Just tremendous work by the Caps in controlling this game. Third line right wing Ryan Leonard, he scored an even strength goal 25 seconds into the second period for his third goal in this regular season, and he was tied for number 4 on the Caps in 5-on-5 shot attempt percentage for the game per natural stat trick at 72.22. The Caps, with Leonard on the ice in 5-on-5 situations in the game, had 13 shot attempts versus allowing just 5 shot attempts. How about this? Leonard, at 20 years and 273 days, became the youngest Caps player to score at least 1 goal in each of at least 2 consecutive regular season games since Nicholas Backstrom in March 2008 at 20 years and 103 days. Really good to see Ryan Leonard doing well. The Caps took him with the number 8 overall pick in the 2023 NHL draft. By the way, he was on a third line for which Justin Sourdif was the center. Sourdif got moved from fourth line right wing to third line center. Hendrix Lapierre got moved from third line center to second line left wing. Some mixing up of the lines by Caps head coach Spencer Carberry. Also, defenseman Jacob Chychrun scored a power play goal, 1:33 into the second period for his third goal in this regular season. The Caps went 1 for 2 on the power play, giving them a power play goal in each of 4 4 consecutive games. There has been a good bit of complaining about the Caps power play. And no, it hasn't always looked pretty, but the Caps now have scored a power play goal in each of 4 consecutive games. The grade 8, Caps top line right wing Alex Ovechkin, he had a primary assist and was tied for number 2 on the Caps with 7 total shot attempts, though he did have just 1 shot on goal. The Caps starting goaltender was Logan Thompson. He stopped 18 of the 19 shots on goal that he faced. Really wasn't tested much with the Caps dominating the puck possession battle, but he was good when he was tested. The Caps went 2 for 2 on the penalty kill. Your Caps scratches for this game were defenseman Declan Chisholm and Dylan McElrath, and winger Sonny Milano, and Caps center Pierre-Luc Dubois remains on injured reserve. This due to a lower body injury that he suffered in the Caps 1-0 win at the New York Rangers on October 12th. Next up for the Caps are 2 games this weekend at the Columbus Blue Jackets Friday night at 7 and home to the Ottawa Senators Saturday night at 7. And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Thursday's show, episode 1183. We'll provide you with more on the Washington Commanders. Also on Thursday's show, discuss the Washington Wizards. Their 2025-2026 regular season opener is on Wednesday night. Wizards at the Milwaukee Bucks, Wednesday night at 8. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.
The damn Washington Wizards.
Tailgates, game nights, big matchups, whatever the plan, Z-Biotic's pre-alcohol probiotic drink fits into your pregame routine. It's a probiotic drink designed to break down a toxic byproduct of alcohol responsible for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol supports your body's natural response, so you can stay sharp for what's next, even after a night out. Just drink a pre-alcohol before drinking and wake up feeling great the next day, all season long. Head to zbiotics.com/pod15 and get 15% off your first order. Backed by a 100% money-back guarantee. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.